Teaching autistic people to make eye contact and look at people's faces and look at their eyes is a terribly controversial topic. And I'm going to argue today that it's very important and almost critical that we actually work on teaching autistic children this skill from a very early age. My name is Carrie Woodward. I'm a board-certified behavior analyst, and I've been working with autistic people for over 20 years. So in order to receive a diagnosis of autism, a person has to present deficits in the area of social communication and social interaction, as well as having the presence of some sort of repetitive and ritualistic behavior. In this video, we're only going to focus on those first two deficits to receive a diagnosis of autism, the social communication and the social interaction. Both of those are actually lumped together in the newest DSM, the DSM-5. And I think it's a very interesting combination only because communication is inherently social. We learn to communicate so that we can communicate with other people. If you grew up on a desert island all by yourself, you'd really have no reason to learn how to overtly communicate because there would be nobody around to listen to you. So you would sure talk in your head or think to yourself, but there'd be no reason to actually learn how to vocally communicate. So communication inherently is a social behavior. It's my belief that these two deficits, the social communication and the social interaction, actually stem from the difference in the autistic person's eye gaze patterns, which is different from a neurotypical person's eye gaze patterns. And this difference is very evident at an early age, like infancy. They've done a bunch of baby studies looking at where eyes gaze, how long they stay where they're gazed, what the duration of time is spent in certain places. And for babies that go on to receive a diagnosis of autism, they spend significantly less time gazing at faces. When they do gaze at a face, they gaze less often at the eyes and the mouth, which are really the two most important places on the face to look, as opposed to a neurotypical baby who spends a lot more time gazing at a face and spends more time when they're at the face looking at the eyes and the mouth. What this demonstrates is that for some reason, probably genetic, autistic babies and children spend a lot less time looking at people's faces and their eyes and their mouths than neurotypical babies and children do. And looking at people's faces is important. Inherently, human beings are social creatures. We were a herd community. Back in the days of hunter-gatherers, looking at people, watching their faces was actually a survival method. So if you were a part of a group and you had a person at the front of your group that was leading your group on an expedition, you would watch that person for indications of what you should be doing, right? You would look to see if their faces gave any sort of indication of fear, of distress, of alarm, and you would most likely respond by seeing that person's face, by doing something to keep yourself safe. So if they looked distressed or panicked, you might also try to run away or leave a situation. So looking at people's faces, reading facial expressions, spending time looking at people was a survival tactic. It was how groups of human beings survived. Obviously, as society has evolved, this has become less important as a survival tactic, but still holds so much inherent value in learning from other people. This lack of looking at people's faces and eyes and mouths is why autistic babies tend to develop language atypically. Babies need to be watching the mouths of their caregivers to figure out how the mouth moves in order to make the sounds that are coming out of the mouth. So as they're beginning to babble and play around with sounds, they're watching the mouths of their caregivers to see if they can do the same thing. Can their mouth do the same shape? Can they produce that same sound? This is how a neurotypical baby is going to develop language. So autistic babies who won't go on to receive a diagnosis of autism until much later, but what we know that eye gaze pattern is already differentiated at a young age. When they're not spending that much time looking at people's faces and mouths, they're missing this critical learning piece for communication. There's actually been a study done that shows that neurotypical babies are more drawn to baby talk. So baby talk, or you can also hear it called motherese or parentese, it's essentially a style of talking. It's using real words. So you would say the word bottle, you wouldn't say the word baba, but you would do it in a style that's sort of exaggerated and sing-songy and up and down. Neurotypical babies are drawn to this. Their eye gazes avert when they hear this type of very exaggerated, pitchy sound with motion and slow motion. Neurotypical babies are spending their eye gaze looking where they hear this baby talk. And this baby talk really happens quite naturally for most parents. We sort of fall into it with our own babies. But autistic babies, again, well before they would receive a diagnosis, but when these eye gaze patterns are already differentiated, are spending a lot less time being drawn to baby talk. So they're not being called by that sound, and they're not spending more time looking. So this tendency to be drawn to baby talk is already bringing neurotypical babies more focused on the face and the mouth, watching faces, watching mouths, than autistic babies. So again, they're missing out on this really critical learning that's happening by watching people's faces. So if this difference in eye gaze is most likely genetic and present from a very young age, how can we possibly address it using a behavioral strategy? Okay, so I have a theory. Everyone, neurodiverse and neurotypical people, spend time looking at, gazing at things that function as reinforcers for us. If you're new to the behavioral world, let's just talk really briefly about a reinforcer. A reinforcer is any sort of item or event that when it follows a behavior, that behavior is strengthened in some way. It becomes stronger and more resilient. It becomes more consistent. It happens more frequently. The intensity increases. Some dimension of the behavior is strengthened or improved when it is reinforced, okay? So reinforcement then is this process of something happening following behavior and then that behavior becoming strengthened over time. And it happens for everybody. This is a universal behavioral principle. It is not unique to autistic people. It's every living being, including non-human animals like dogs and cats. So we are all subject to this reinforcement principle. It would be as if I see my phone ring and I press the green button, which is the response or the behavior, and then I pick it up and I hear the voice of the person that is making the phone call, the reinforcer. In the future, when my phone rings and I see this person's name on the caller ID, I'm more likely to press the green button. The green button pushing is strengthened because it was reinforced, okay? So this is a very basic understanding of reinforcement. So then the reinforcer is that item or the event that when it is presented following a behavior, strengthens the behavior. And what functions as a reinforcer is unique to every person, right? So what functions as a reinforcer for me may not function as a reinforcer for you. And also things that function as a reinforcer for me today may not function as a reinforcer for me tomorrow. So ice cream serves as a reinforcer for me. I love ice cream. If somebody gave me a bowl of ice cream after doing a hard day's work, I am much more likely to do hard day's work going forward. Again, reinforcement is not a cognitive process. It's not I think I'm going to do it more. It's just a behavioral phenomenon that occurs when behavior is reinforced. When a reinforcer, something that is actually functioning as a reinforcer, follows behavior, that behavior is strengthened. So ice cream serves as a reinforcer for me, okay? It may not serve as a reinforcer for somebody who's lactose intolerant. That person might get very ill when they eat ice cream. So the same item may not serve to be a reinforcer for two different people. In the same way, ice cream may serve as a reinforcer for me today because I haven't had ice cream in a long time. But tomorrow, if I already finished a pint of ice cream, then when somebody says, hey, do you want some ice cream? It may not serve as a reinforcer for me in that moment because I'm full and I'm overindulged with ice cream and I don't want any anymore. So a reinforcer is unique to each individual, and also what serves as a reinforcer in one moment changes because our motivation is constantly changing throughout the day. So if we look at things that are reinforcing to us, if I spend a lot of my eye gaze time looking at things that serve to reinforce me, then we may be able to assume that faces and eyes and the mouth do not serve as reinforcers innately for people with autism. Whether or not this is because of their genetic differences or whether or not it's because they just at infancy don't have the eye gaze patterns that are allowing them to spend enough time looking at it, the end result is the same. Most people with autism do not find looking at other faces reinforcing. In fact, when you hear adult autistic people discuss this idea of eye contact, they'll often tell you, it's uncomfortable, it's awkward, I don't like the way it makes me feel. So very clearly, we may be able to say that looking at faces does not serve to reinforce them, But I've worked with hundreds of people with autism, and what I can tell you is that they do spend a lot of time gazing and looking at the things that they find reinforcing. I've had kids who are obsessed with Mickey Mouse, and boy, do they spend a lot of time looking at Mickey Mouse on the iPad. I've had kids who love watching wheels turn, and they will literally spend hours laying on their side watching a car roll back and forth because clearly the wheels moving serves as a reinforcer for them. They spend time looking at things that are reinforcing to them. So, if autistic people do not spend time looking at people's faces and eyes, a good theory may be that these faces and eyes do not serve as reinforcers for them. We do know that they spend a lot of time looking at things that do serve as reinforcers to them. So, as a behavior analyst, what we can do is we can work to make eyes and faces function as a reinforcer for autistic people. Then they will spend more time looking at people's faces and eyes, which is going to open up this huge door of learning for them. This is a complete departure from a traditional viewpoint of teaching eye contact in ABA programs. A lot of ABA programs still today rely on this very skewed idea of why looking at faces is important. When I first began doing ABA, we would do very basic programs to try to get kids to look at our faces. And we would call their name and try to get them to make eye contact, or we would even say, look at me, and wait for them to make eye contact and look at us. But this is teaching them to look at our faces when we call their name or when they hear an instruction. We are doing nothing to actually address the reason that autistic people are not looking at faces, which is that faces don't serve as reinforcers for them. There are even ABA programs that are devoted to teaching kids to make eye contact with people when they're having a conversation with them. Look at their eyes, find their eyes. Again, we are not addressing the core issue, which is that faces do not serve to reinforce, but we're simply teaching them this skill to look at other people and to make eye contact, which is exactly why autistic adults say it's so uncomfortable for them, because we have done nothing to change the value of faces. All we have done is say, you need to look more at other people. And why? Because that's what neurotypical people do. It doesn't benefit them in any way other than make them feel uncomfortable, make them feel awkward. They don't gain anything from it. And for what? To serve as looking more neurotypical? Most autistic adults that are speaking out about this are talking about how unfair it is for them to conform to a society that says making eye contact and looking at people's faces is the norm. And I agree with them if that's the purpose of teaching them to look at people's faces. We shouldn't make them look more neurotypical. What we should be doing from a very early age is this work to condition faces and eyes and mouths to serve as reinforcers for them so that they're naturally more inclined to look at people's faces. We know that autistic people look at the things that they find reinforcing, so let's make eyes and faces reinforcing so that they're naturally going to spend more time looking at faces and eyes. So here's my thesis statement. Here is the crux of what I hope to do here at Autism Jumpstart. I want to teach parents exercises that they can easily do with their young children to start this socialization conditioning process so that we can start to bring value to faces naturally so that they are more inclined to spend time looking at people's faces, which will then be a door of learning for them. They may even begin to just start learning in the natural environment because they're already spending more time looking at things that are going to provide learning opportunities. Watching wheels spin on a car is not providing a learning opportunity for a child. Watching a person talk to them and watch their mouth move and see how sounds are formed and what shapes the mouth needs to make is a huge learning opportunity. Every exercise that I hope to teach parents here at Autism Jumpstart are really geared toward young children. They're geared toward children who are delayed and may not yet have a formal diagnosis. They're geared toward children who may be going through the diagnostic process. Maybe you've already received a diagnosis for your child, but you're now beginning the painstaking process of trying to get them enrolled in an ABA program, of which there are months-long wait lists. So then you're stuck with a kid who you know needs to be in treatment, but you can't get them any treatment. This is going to be for kids who are younger siblings to children with autism, because we know that the risk of a younger sibling receiving a diagnosis of autism is much higher than a child who doesn't have a sibling with autism. So if you already have one child with autism, and then you have a younger child, do these exercises with them. The thing about these exercises is that they cannot hurt. They can only help. So there's nothing that you could do with these exercises that would be detrimental to your child if they didn't go on to receive a diagnosis of autism. What it does is strengthen these core socialization pieces. It creates value in the human face and looking at people's faces. And eventually we're going to get into how we can actually work on stimulating some of these early communication skills so that when your child does finally get into an ABA program, they have these beautiful foundation skills that make them so ready and available for learning. All anyone says about getting a diagnosis of autism is that the earlier you can start the treatment, the better the outcomes are for your child. And then all of a sudden you have roadblock after roadblock after roadblock in actually getting this valuable treatment for your child. So what I want to give you is all of the stuff that you can do with your kids. You can teach caregivers to do them with your kids. You can teach the babysitter to do them with your kids. They're easy exercises that you can naturally build in to your playtime. They're things you're probably already doing with your child, and yet I'm gonna give you a different strategy on how you can be doing it to create more value in the face and get your kid to spend more time looking at your face during these exercises. Okay, so here's exercise number 1. It's a simple book reading exercise. Most of us read books to our kids. I think we've all heard that reading books to our kids is super important. So we do that. And usually when I see parents reading books to their kids, the setup is that they have a child sitting in their lap. They're both facing the book and the book is sitting in the front. So your child's head is actually sitting right in front of your face, which provides zero opportunity for you guys to actually connect and make it an interactive experience. It becomes an independent experience for your child because all they're doing is looking at the book. They may be hearing your voice, but it does not become interactive because there's zero exchange in face-to-face contact. So instead, what you're going to do is you're going to find a book, hopefully numerous books, that have some pattern to them, that have some things that you can build in to create fun and engagement with the story. I'm going to show you a video example with my son. Now, this is a disclaimer. You will see my kids in videos as examples. My children are neurotypical. They are not autistic. I am not pretending that my kids are autistic, but I find it so much more valuable to be able to show and demonstrate an exercise or a strategy rather than just explain it. Because sometimes it can be confusing when you're just hearing words, but if you get to see it being done, it can make more sense for you. So I'm going to show you a video example where I'm sitting with my son and we're reading a book called Polar Bear, What Do You Hear? There's a couple of these books, Brown Bear, What Do You See? These stories are great because what they are is a pattern that's similar at every page. So your kid sort of begins to understand what's coming next. And with each page, you can create something really fun happening with the animal. This fun thing that happens every page is going to start to build excitement and anticipation when you get to that page turn part every single time. So this is what you do. You begin, you sit down across from your child. Now, if your child is a baby, and you can do this with young kids, I would say starting as early as 1. You could have them in a little play seat if they're having a hard time even just sitting still. And you have the book facing your child, but then you're reading the story to them and turning the page. And then when you get to that part where you turn the page and there's something really fun and exciting that happens, get your kid to laugh. You are the parent. You know what makes your kids laugh more than anybody else. This laughter is sort of your cue that what's happening is reinforcement. They enjoy it. They're excited. They are looking forward to it happening.
Polar bear, what do you hear? I hear a lion roaring in my ear.
We're outside.
Roar! Lion, what do you hear? I hear a hippopotamus snorting in my ear.
That's not a one. That's not as scary. It's not scary.
Hippopotamus, what do you hear? I hear a flamingo fluting in my ear. Float, 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 float. Flamingo, what do you hear? I hear a zebra braying in my ear. Bray, bray, bray.
I try to hear. Mom, do that again.
Bray, bray, bray. Zebra, what do you hear? I hear a boa constrictor hissing in my ear.
That's a quiet. I'm so quiet.
Mhm.
I'm so quiet.
After a few times of the pattern, or maybe a few rounds of the story, when you can sense that your kid is anticipating what's coming on that next page, you're gonna pause yourself. You're not gonna turn the page, and you're simply gonna wait for them to find your face, okay? In the beginning, this could be very brief. It could be just a fleeting second of looking at you and then looking back to the page to see what comes next.
Boa constrictor, what do you hear? I hear an elephant trumpeting in my ear. Elephant, what do you hear? I hear a leopard snarling in my ear. Leopard, what do you hear? I hear a peacock
Peacock.
yelping in my ear.
What is-
Yelp. Peacock, what do you hear? I hear a walrus bellowing in my ear. Whoa.
This is amazing. What we're doing is we are making your face the key to unlock the door of this super exciting thing that's happening on the next page. Your face begins to be valuable because it's the key to unlock the door where there's a really cool thing inside. And that's what we're going to be trying to do with all of these exercises, is create this value in faces and eyes by making them the key to unlock the door to something really cool. And what you want is to make sure that the cool thing is somehow interactive, that they're engaging with you. You're not just handing them a piece of candy, because that candy is an independent experience. They take that piece of candy and they walk away. What you want is you want them to continue to want to engage with you. You want the reinforcement to actually be this interactive exchange with you. So as you turn the page and you make the funny noise and you flap the book at their face and they start to laugh, you get to do it again on the next page, and you do the whole thing over and over again. And every single time, you're waiting for them to look up at you. Over time, we're going to evolve their response and make it more complex. So in the beginning, maybe it's just a fleeting eye look. And then maybe we want them to hold our gaze for one full second before we turn the page and do that really fun thing. Then maybe we want to hold their gaze for a couple of seconds before we turn the page and do that really fun thing.
Walrus, what do you hear? I hear a zookeeper whistling in my ear.
Why do you keep? Why?
Maybe at some point we even want to work on what the word is next and have them start to say the word that comes next. Or we give them a word that they can use like turn the page. So maybe we instead, once we get their eyes that are looking at us consistently, maybe we then turn it into prompting them to say turn. You still want them to be looking at you. You want that connection. You want it to be engaged and interactive. But we're making the responses a little bit more complex each time.
Oh, what happens next, do you think?
No, they haven't. Let's turn the page and see.
So this is a super easy exercise. It's something that we're already doing with our kids on a daily basis. We're just shifting the way that it's done. We're bringing the focus to have it be an interactive experience as opposed to an isolated, independent experience with your child looking at the book and with their back to you. Bring them in front of you, have it become an interactive experience, and start to create value with the face and the eyes. So this is exercise 1, and we're going to talk so much more about other things that you guys can be doing on a daily basis, easy exercises that you can build into your daily routine that are going to start to bring value to the face. So every exercise that I'm going to discuss with you guys is going to be aimed at getting our kids to spend more time looking at our faces because we're creating value with our faces. We're creating value in looking at people. We are not trying to teach your autistic children to look at your face and make eye contact because that's what neurotypical kids do. it is what neurotypical kids do, but we're not doing it just so they look neurotypical, right? We're doing it because there's all this learning that's happening when we are looking at other people's faces. When your kids are in school, if you walk into a classroom and you look, they're looking at each other all the time. Shoot, I missed that instruction. What are we supposed to be doing right now? Oh, what did the teacher say? Oh, I'm gonna go. They're looking at each other as cues of what they need to be doing. So when our autistic kids aren't looking at other people, they're missing out on all this amazing learning that's happening. So all of these exercises are built around creating value and basically conditioning something that does not serve as a reinforcer for your child yet to serve as a reinforcer so that they're naturally more drawn to spend time gazing at the face and the eyes. I hope to be able to give you guys simple exercises for things that you can do easily throughout your day, things that you're already doing with your kids, but you just may be doing them in a different way than is really beneficial for your child. So giving you small tweaks that you can make to some of the things that you're doing with your children to start to sort of do some of the socialization conditioning. I hope that you found value in this video. I hope that you can take away pieces of this video and bring actionable change to your day-to-day routine with your children. And if you did find value, like, subscribe to the channel, watch for more videos, share it with a friend that has an autistic child that you think could benefit. And I hope to bring you guys more value each and every video.